All right, morning, everybody. I'm Jonathan. I've got the privilege of chairing this session this morning, which is on Borderlands. The theme is Borderlands, and we've got 5 listed presentations, but my understanding is that Yashi isn't with us. So we have the 4 presentations. That gives us a bit more space. I'll invite each of the speakers and sets of speakers to come up here and or to be online and speak. So yes, Chloe is joining us online, but the rest of us are in the room. So yeah, welcome Chloe, welcome everybody else online. Really lovely to see you here with us too. And so we'll make a start. Mridula's going to start, and if you could introduce yourselves, that would be great. Thank you. You need this. All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mridula Sridhar, and I am doing my PhD in counseling studies at the University of Edinburgh. I have also been training in Indian classical music since the age of 4, and so that's given me a grounding from which to ask larger questions about this modern world that we live in. And as a practicing psychotherapist, I realized that a lot of these things that I'm questioning about the world are very much embedded in modern psychotherapy itself. And so these are some of the questions that I'm exploring in my PhD research, and some of those themes that I've been exploring over the last year are what I'm going to bring to you today. And I'd love to hear what comes up for you as you hear me speak. So I want to start by introducing you to Girindra Shekhar Bose. Who was he? He was the founder of the Indian Psychoanalytic Society, and he was developing his ideas about the Indian psyche in the early 1900s, around the same time as Freud, but almost independent. And he's most known for a letter that he wrote to Freud in 1929, where he challenged Freud on the cultural relevance of the Oedipal complex. So Bose wrote that he did not observe the Oedipal complex in his Indian male patients, and he saw the cause for it as a desire to be female that he saw in his Indian male patients. So he speculated that this desire to be female was more easily unearthed in Indian male patients than perhaps European ones. And for Freud, in the Oedipal complex, a boy must develop masculinity in a very, very particular way, and that necessarily involves rejecting femininity to be a mature male adult. But for Bose, masculinity and femininity were not opposites. In fact, they coexist. And he saw that we all had the capacity to carry multiple genders within us. And I think this says something about the kind of cultures from which they were theorizing as well. And so that's the first thing that I want to say here, which is that the kind of culture from which we theorize about the psyche impacts how we understand it and how we understand the self. And now, since Bose, there's been an entire tradition of psychoanalysis in India that has come up from his work. But when I did my training in psychology in my undergrad in India, and also when I did my master's in psychotherapy in the UK, there was no mention of Bose or of this tradition of Indian psychoanalysis. So I'm here with that pain and frustration of how this entire tradition was hidden from me, and how their contributions to the field and to understanding the Indian psyche are erased from formal training. And I have to go looking for them to find them. And what I've been finding are parts of my erased history. And so this is the second thing that I wanted to highlight, which is that there's a complete erasure of certain cultural understandings of the psyche. What Bose was theorizing is not seen as the norm. It is not studied or introduced in psychotherapy training as a possible way of being in the world. And since I'm trained in Indian classical music, I can observe this capacity for holding multiple positions for gender fluidity across musical traditions in the subcontinent. I sing bhakti poetry or Telugu padams, where the erotic bliss of being one with the divine is experienced from a position of femininity. And there's also a feminine narrative voice in these songs. It's called Nayika Bhavam, where the singer or poet, who's often male, is yearning to become one with, to be looked at even fleetingly, or is demanding or pleading for the grace of the divine. And beyond this narrative voice, I've also seen the descriptions made of male deities, which often have a very feminine quality to it. Here's a song that I have in mind as I'm saying this. And it goes, Ambuchalochana Kambushu Bhagriva Chandrabimbana. And it literally means, it's a description of Krishna, who's a male deity, and it literally means he's possessing eyes as beautiful as a lotus. He has soft words and speech. He has lips as red as the bimba fruit, and he has a face as beautiful as the moon. And so there's a femininity to his masculinity, but that kind of seems odd to the modern Western eyes to describe a male deity that way. But this feminine description of male deities, the Nayika Bhavam of male poets, and the capacity of a person to flit among gender identities seems very natural to me. This is a position I can understand immediately when I'm listening to music or hearing stories without any explanation for it. And while singing these songs, I wouldn't even register these as feminine qualities attributed to a male deity. This was something that I was able to write when I was doing my research, and I thought, oh yeah, that's how it is, but that's not something I would even register when I'm singing. And so I want to say that I've grown up in modern society, consuming Western ideas, research, culture, and norms, and I recognize the lens that I have internalized, making it important for me to question how my own understanding of being in the world may be drawn from very colonial notions. And this way of being dominates my everyday conscious experience. I was taught English as my first language, and I feel more comfortable thinking and speaking in it than in Tamil, which is my mother tongue. I have studied modern psychology and psychotherapy as if it's synonymous with the universal experience of the psyche around the world. For example, for Freud, masculinity is equated to strength and activity, and femininity is equated to weakness and passivity. And we see these values reflected in his theories. We see these values reflected in the modern culture around us. How much of this have I internalized? But also, I've been taught traditional, generational, cultural, familial values, societal norms, and traditional art forms. Music, especially, put me in touch with my past, with historical voices, with languages, and different ways of expression. And so my current experience is then going back and forth between these identities. Du Bois calls this double consciousness. There are parts of myself that I suppress, that I sometimes look down upon, and that I have to hide. And this hiding has a historical quality to it, as if my body knows from my generational past that it's dangerous to make certain parts of the self accessible to others. But also it has a more recent quality to it. Through multiple generations, we've been progressively hiding more and more of ourselves, not only from others, but also from ourselves. And this is not an individual phenomenon. The world we live in reinforces this hiding. It's designed to keep us on shaky ground. And so my research then is a quest to recall what we've hidden from ourselves. Ever since I moved to the UK, I've experienced quiet moments where I tear up as I sing Tamil Bhakti or Sudhandiram songs. Sudhandiram means freedom in Tamil, and these songs I sing were particularly written during British colonial rule in India. And it seems my non-modern, non-Western consciousness resides in these moments of lived felt experience. So my tears as I sing Tamil songs perhaps show a presence of grief, a loss that is felt but cannot be explicitly articulated, the loss of not knowing where to turn to find a sense of cultural rootedness, the loss of recognizing the diminishing connection I have with my cultural way of being compared to my parents and grandparents, leaving me to rely on my unconscious knowledge, which I have inherited generationally that resides deep within me, but has been forced to hide itself, even from me. And so there's a deep grief in this process of writing or researching this experience. An experience that prevalent theories in psychotherapy do not even acknowledge, which adds another layer to that grief. So then the question or questions that I want to leave you with today are, what can healing then mean for those of us with split colonial identities? How do I experience or construct my identity? How do I relate to the modern West? How do I continue practicing psychotherapy as it is when it does not address this, when it does not name this double consciousness? And how do I connect with my Nayika Bhavam? This is my most favorite question. How do I connect with that Nayika Bhavam, with my feminine voice and my feminine desire? Thank you. Very good.
Thank you very much, Mridula. We have Chloe, next. And Chloe, you're online, and thank you. Welcome. Whenever you're ready.
Can everyone hear me okay? Is it okay?
We can hear you fine.
Brilliant. All right, thank you. I know how it feels to walk into a nightclub before I can begin to find the words. Shimmering bodies, a sweaty room, the strobe lights of my favorite club. See, even from here, I know how my favorite bars smell. The sticky aftertaste of spilled booze and sugary beer, sharp floral undertones fighting against the unescapable stench of body sweat. Before beginning my PhD entitled The Night Self, which I'm going to be drawing from as I talk to you today, I knew that these things mattered. But how would I fit these sensory experiences into the boxes of academia? What would I even call such feelings? How would I tell their stories? Stories of the nighttime economy in criminology, my home discipline, have been and beyond have been quick to focus on disorder, behavioral changes, violence, and thus corresponding regulation and risk mitigation. But what's largely been left out of such tales is the realm of the unconscious, the passions, the emotions, and the moods that all play a role in shaping the world around us. For the last year, I've been carrying out empirical research in the nighttime economy that has led me to understand that trying to make sense of the space through an overly bounded approach neglects what makes nightlife what it is, and why it plays such a big role in sociality today. Scholars, such as yourselves, have begun to think about the messiness of embodied research and how this could shape how we, as Pullen suggests, write differently in academia. So today, I'm going to follow that line of inquiry and ask, as I have done in my own empirical work, how we research the affective forces that shape the experiences of nightlife. I think about the nighttime economy as a place of atmosphere and affect, where individuals navigate disconnections and continuities with their daytime subjectivities. My journey in and out of the field during my fieldwork led me to understand that autoethnographic methods can actually offer an embodied way of knowing that speaks to affectivity's relationship with the mind and the body. But first, what do I mean when I call the nighttime economy a site of atmosphere and affect? I believe that theories of affectivity can help us make sense of the experiential attraction of the nighttime city. Affectivity refers to the realm of the unconscious and how this shapes how we feel and interact with the world and the people around us. See, conceptualizations of affect allow us to go one step beyond what is felt or how such a feeling is articulated as an emotion. There is a key distinction between affect and feeling, with McCormack suggesting that affect refers to a vague yet intense atmosphere, direct quote, while a feeling is then an expression of this sensation. Affects can layer and assemble upon each other and any other materialities present to form an atmosphere. This can be understood as a haze that radiates through individuals, filling a space with a power able to shape moods, relations, and behavior largely that aligns with said atmosphere. Through this, bodies are brought closer together emotionally and physically, a sort of imaginary community built upon the stickiness of sugary drinks and a sticky floor that, trust me, does not wash out of your shoes no matter how hard you try. I ask, in my PhD, could these sensory elements allow us to better understand the nighttime economy and its happenings within? Would we better capture what the space is by understanding it as a realm where normal daily life comes to be suspended for a moment of what Turner would call in-betweenness? But how do we research this? This was, and perhaps still is, a question at the forefront of my PhD, as I set out to make sense of the spaces of nightlife, where questions over research access are ever pressing, given the nighttime economy's characterization as an illicit and transgressive place, even built on what could be called an insider charm. I grappled with these questions. How could I put the unconscious into the conscious words, and how could I bring the night's darkness into the light of day? I set out to undergo an extensive period of observational research with a pub crawl company, already aware that such an ethnography would be a whole body effort relying on all the sensory elements presented to my body while in the field, as well as what I was observing. See, ethnography is well established within my home disciplines of first geography and now criminology, having been used by many of my academic heroes to uncover a range of lived experiences across the nighttime city. From stories of the lived experiences of bouncers to drug users and partygoers, I was inspired by such ethnographies and set out to make sense how atmospheres of the night are built, felt, changed, and ruptured. In the field, I came to understand that my researcher self was not divorced from my own self, nor my night self, and that my observations were inseparable with the passions, emotions, and moods I have already suggested I think are integral for understanding how we experience nightlife. In the field, I was welcomed into a social world of lock-ins, citywide bouncer group chats, and slowly but surely, a range of misogynistic behaviour that would eventually cause me to pull out of my fieldwork. I realised then that my emotional responses to what I was experiencing were not additional insights, but were forming knowledge. Forced to withdraw from the field for my own safety, I left with a set of tales of raw emotional stories about my time in the nighttime economy. I asked myself, positioned in a law school at Edinburgh, if I could throw caution to the wind and tell the tales of my experiences through an autoethnographic account of the night world that had unfolded around me. It was new to me, but could I follow Tillis's assertion to begin with the self, reach out, go back in, and perhaps out once more? It was scary to imagine putting myself in the picture so explicitly. It felt frightening to make permanent my fleeting emotions and subjectivities. But then I asked myself, wasn't I always in the picture? Perhaps I was always carrying out an autoethnography just by existing in the nighttime city and writing my thoughts and feelings. Those effective in-betweens as my shoes stuck to the floor, a drink was spilt on me, I laughed with a bouncer on the street, or I cried in bed alone after a night spent in the field. What mattered wasn't just what I was meant to be observing, but what I was personally experiencing. Those were stories of the night too. It feels vulnerable to lay down and then analyse how my neck prickled going to certain bars. The atmosphere putting me on edge before I could even represent to myself or admit that actually I was scared. But these are the tales of the nighttime city that aren't told because we don't always have room for such emotional and effective accounts. They don't quite fit in. And that is precisely why I believe that they need to be told. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chloe. Thank you. Right. I just wanted to pause for a moment because having had Mridulas, and did you see the comments on yours? And thank you, Chloe, for yours again. So we will move on, and it's Tim who's now going to present. You need, okay. Join them. No. All right. I will clip then.
Hello, everyone. Hi. I'm going to be reading from an article. It's me reading out loud fairly quickly. I've got 15 points to make. I hope I get through all 15. Let's see. Point number one, I'm interested in the deregulation of the self and moments of deregulation in 20th century and 21st century thought, if you like. In the literature tradition, in 1948, the Leavises argued there was only great literature and the great tradition, and other literature didn't count. One of the problems I have with autoethnography, when I started, I published Performative Autoethnography in 2018. Norman Denzil liked it, he told me, this article, which was lovely, was as someone who studies my own meditation practice, which has a Buddhist philosophy, and in Buddhism, there's no self. What do I do with personal experience? Two quotes. Language is an element of the subject, the most subjective element, of which the most subjective in turn is the rhythm. Mesconic, 1982. Openness to social injustice and climate change. We are on the edge of disaster without being able to situate it in the future. It is always rather already past. That which has put a stop to every arrival. To think the disaster is to have no longer any future in which to think it. Blanchot. Is experience always temporal? Literary devices, styles, rhythms, and the advent of metaphor with its effective sensory connotations, multivalence, and polysemy problematize empirical nonfiction. Does efficacy in writing appear primarily to militate against subtle embodied experience? Breath studies. The Clinical Journal of Breath Research, 2007 to 2023, the work of the European Respiratory Society's practice-focused education for respiratory professionals. Breath Journal, 2004 to 2022, the Canadian Respiratory Research Network, and the BMJ only have, echoing our first paper, a handful of references to searches on meditation, prana, pranayama, yoga, and yogic. A handful. When considering the vast realm of human knowledge in the oral cultures and non-linguistic domain, this constitutes most of the success of the human species in the transition from animal to human. This article was published in New Writing. Writing is nothing but new writing, as is most Western knowledge, new knowledge. This is research about epistemology. As Purushottama Villamoria pointed out through a session at the recent Respiratory Philosophy and Sound Art Conference in 2022, that suggests renewed interest in the breath. He says, breath studies might already be but a footnote in the non-Western field of prana study when considering Brahmanic Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, Ayurveda, Patanjali's Ashtanga Yoga, Kundalini, and Hatha Yogas, and with key classical Chinese medicinal systems. The dissolution of the self, non-self. Recent interest in post-qualitative research highlights three factors in the dissolution of the self. One, so they're talking about the complexity of the post-qualitative movement. One, the linguistic turn, the crisis of representation, the possibilities of writing as a research method. Two, the affective turn. Three, alongside post-humanism, new materialisms and new empiricisms. I would describe these three threats as infinitude in post-representational forms, excess in sensory affective embodiment, and lastly, proliferation in systematic or systemic appropriation. That's very complicated. I might not have time to explain that. But this leaves us with a more specific problem. On the one hand, a combination of the phenomenological impulse informing embodied cognition, driven largely by the cognitive sciences and neurosciences, alongside a diverse permissiveness that allows and encourages first-person experience, including autoethnographies, to diversify methodologies and sees increasingly diverse post-qualitative research into individualized, uniquely situated subject-embodied experience. But what is non-self then? And how do I write about it? How have I written about it over the last 7 years? How am I doing for time?
You're okay. Got 2 or 3 minutes.
Okay. A type of mindful writing. Although the outcome of this process is not necessarily clarity, more one of slowing down cognitive processes through syntactical means, because mindful writing cannot be a tool or a technique. through some sensory affective states as delineated in Buddhist meditation, studying my meditation practice, reach types of specificity and forms of precision in practice that can only be known or accomplished through embodied extra-linguistic silence. This is what's also called the non-conceptual. Okay, I debated the difference between what Ricoeur calls the dialogue between hermeneutics and the semiological exegetical disciplines, i.e. interpretive versus descriptive modalities. And in discussion with Ellis and Bob Buckner's sort of claims for autoethnography, something Denzer said to Ellis, being caught between the hard social science and interpretive humanistic inquiry. Now, Ricoeur's aim in the hermeneutical function of distanciation is to make distanciation a positive term. I call this, and borrowed a term from theology, known as epistemic distance. What is the epistemic distance we have in our work, in our writing? There's a disappearance of the self in Bourdieu when he defines the notion of the field. Again, this is quite complex, but Bourdieu's field theory, potentially at least, hands to capital cumulative worth and value, and to the field the valuation and hierarchy of habitus and capital association. So basically, he defines the self as a between and caught between the definitions of the values of the field and the values of capital. What then occurs as the unintended and problematic outcome is that the self-subject disappears entirely, subsumed into a set of relations in which it is embedded. Final.
You're about to do one more.
Oh, okay. So I got to point 10. So there's 5 more points to go and only time for one more point. Maybe I should give the last one, the last point. So the last point is, having skipped 4 steps, would be, let's use the shuffling paperwork. A couple of extracts from meditative inquiry as it sounds. What does it sound like? Here's an extract. Writing from meditation. Unborn to ourselves, lived yet not lived, breathing but not breathed, to have breath but not air, to have air and not breathe. A derelict breath, ruined, jagged and pinched, creased, gathered or gripped, is the one fought for whilst being deprived by others of air. Or by self-strangulation, the asthmatic's inability to breathe out, that we do not fully inhale nor fully trust to exhale, or so it seems. When one is not loved, where one is loved, only that breath is open. We need to rethink rhythm in a heartbeat, not as a quantity of time, nor as a relation between times, but as a texture within time present. Also deconstruct the metaphysics of presence, but we haven't got time for that, Brian. But thank you.
Thanks, Tim. So we have one more, Fiona and Giulia, who are here in the room. Thank you for your continuing comments online, which we can spot as they come. I think, is there only one more?
There is only one.
Oh, that's
Right.
okay. Here we share the picture.
Right.
So shall I hold it in the,
Yeah.
I can see you. Do I need to hold it in the middle and you hold the paper? Or should I wear it?
Where is it?
I'll just stick here. I'll just put it.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. We, Giulia and Fiona, are dreaming of a course that we can run together, a course about concepts and theory. There are issues to the realization of this dream, as we know that our course is beyond the scope of institutional regulations, that yet it needs some sort of formality to be existent. Teaching this course together would require that I stop receiving emails that open up with, "Thank you very much for your application, but," and I have some sort of position with the institution beyond the imminent end of my temporary contract. We dream of having time we don't currently have between Fiona's teaching and my rejections, to complete a funding bid so that we can create the space for this course to exist for the Center of Creative and Relational Inquiry, a center inside the institution enough to legitimize this course possibility, and yet also outside enough not to need Board of Studies approval.
In this paper, we think with the Manning and Masumi's concept of parapedagogies. Parapedagogies are built on the ethos of alongside-edness. We want our para-institutional dream course to run alongside the main research course between counselling and research. Our main research course speaks to ontoepistemologies and methodologies in relation to the field of counselling and psychotherapy. These necessary but heady concepts are large, and students have the work to do of narrowing these down to work for them in their projects. Instead, our dream course starts with the small, with a simple encounter in the world, and then is expanded through gathering community around the concepts created.
In this course, students begin with an encounter with the world that provides them with a suggestion, a pushback, a smile, an attraction of some sort, a kernel of a concept to build upon during the time spent together. The small is where we begin. It is a concrete anchor relevant to the ordinariness of their lives. The small attunes them to what lies outside of the university, beyond the classroom, beyond those larger bodies of thought and concepts, which often are for some unpronounceable abstractions, like for me, that remain boundless and orderless. Starting with, as Harney and Morton write, some hips, a smile, the way a hand moved, shadow, by no means disrespects ontology, epistemology, or axiology, or the need for some kind of coherence, but it gives those a shape, a color, a vibe, a concreteness that is craving further expansion through alongsideness.
The alongsidedness of a parapedagogy extends to teachers and students being in process together. Teachers are learning with rather than teaching to. The focus is on the collective. Teachers and learners in it together, co-experiencers of the unfolding and the emergent. To facilitate movement, Erin Manning has produced what she refers to as pocket practices, such as backgrounding, foregrounding. These pocket practices are designed to help us pay attention to what our perception needs to stay with process, how we can attend differently, how we can soften, breathe, open. In our dream course, pocket practices emerge and we build our collective ways of moving together.
We dream of a course where theory caresses the kernel concepts, making them bigger, fundamental, impossible to live without, where it is a street or passing smile mobilizing theory into urgency for survival. Causeway Side is the name of a road of Edinburgh in the neighborhood I lived whilst doing my PhD. I crossed it multiple times a day and never noticed its conceptual possibilities. But one evening, one as many others, whilst I was stuck in my writing, Causeway Side came to the rescue. It suggested a way out of conceiving my thesis as a neat row of causal links between events which I felt were occurring simultaneously. Causeway Side became slowly a key concept. It allowed me to write about the relationship between occurrences that, although not causally related, were brought up by an incessant desire of writing. Causeway Side demanded that I find theorists able to make that concept flourish. Deleuze, Guattari, Morton, Manning, Ciccio, and many others made Causeway Side flourish like the fat petunias and the fuchsias that dangled off the Old Bell Inn and which hid the road sign name on the corner with Duncan Street. Causeway Side became this desire on the verge, the desire that writing brings, and that was the hill rolling down. Fast forward 3 years later, I live on the verge of that desire, which is a hill descending from Causeway Side to Ratcliffe Terrace.
I have stayed troubled by an essay I marked a few years ago in the research course. It didn't quite fail, but nearly. It was enlightening to read, but it left me with no means of justifying that it met the assessment criteria. It stayed with me because I felt the students' betrayal in my coalescence. Manning suggests that any critique that is worthy of making should break our heart and should be the hardest thing we ever do. Any other kind of critique is there to prove our own intellect. In the critique of this essay, my heart broke for different reasons. I didn't want to prove my own intellect, but the student had failed as they hadn't proved theirs, not in terms of the predetermined assessment criteria that didn't allow for the taking of different turns. I dream of our course being without such predetermined assessment criteria, a value given in the doing that cannot yet be known. I dream of a course where an imminent critique, whereas Manning writes, valuation grows from within the process, opening the event of assessment to what Whitehead calls creative purpose.
I dream of our course as I sit on Portobello Beach, looking at my children and their friends building precious sandcastles. They mold together possibilities of existences. They stroke the sand, feeling it and smoothing the surface of their creations, which are delicately precious. Sandcastle making as concept creation requires intimacies. I see their hard-working hands merging together around a shared urgency, an intimate encounter, an intervention where the other struggles to keep a form up, a gathering point when finally the tunnels allows for a craved emergence. The same thrill I found in molding Causeway Side. A road name took me to Deleuze, and his hands after quasi-causality to further affirm Causeway Side's existence and power.
I dream of a course where we gather around each other's concepts, each other's sandcastles. I'm inspired by Tunica, Seeley Thompson, and Stefano Harney's reading camp. The camp is set up as a kind of parapedagogy to the idea that reading should be done before class, outside of the university, at home, individually. They write, it's almost as if reading is something about which we are embarrassed. We can do yoga together, pray or meditate together, eat together, but somehow we should read in isolation. Reading becomes a profound movement, not of togetherness and entangled being, but of individuation. Even if the reading is just done in separate corners of a room, there is a dwelling in togetherness. They write, support is the way of creating the society we want right now.
But the day in Portobello is hot. The project has lost its urgency, and the call of the sea is pulling my kids and their friends away. Their castles are suddenly left in the world unattended, as it is now the case with my thesis. They swim careless when suddenly they notice other children observing their creations. The newcomers are first tentative in their steps, circling around what has been left. Then one little courageous foot disrupts the smooth surface, and a hand intervenes. A tower falls only to be turned into a volcano. My kids and their friends run up, troubled by this possession, but it is too late. Their project has invited others in. They have to let it go, and in the end, a new gathering is formed through disruption. Certainly, I'm not quite there yet with my thesis, but I dream of a course that celebrates dispossession through creative disruption rather than assessing through accumulative accreditation.
We dream of a course that ends in celebration and ceremonial passing through in the delight of knocking over sandcastles, disavowing our own conclusions. We dream of a course where the true measure is not what is completed, but what remains, a question, a gesture, a shared intensity that refuses to fade.
Right, so we have a good amount of time to think with and feel with these 4 presentations, these very different presentations, with connections between them that we may have felt. So feel free to offer responses rather than feel under pressure to ask difficult questions. But whatever, where has this taken you? And feel free to ask or say things in response as well to each other. Augustus.
Firstly, thank you all. I just want to say I'm filled with so much, I don't know how to describe it, from Mridula's singing to Tim's enquiry and the meditation and Buddhism to a new course for community. It's like, thank you all for your presentations. I'm just filled with so much. I don't have a word for it. I just feel, yeah, thank you. I really appreciate it. I'm inspired.
And Chloe's nighttime activity. Yeah.
So I just like to share some of my reflections. I think Fiona and Giulia, I would go on that course. So yes, sign me up. Mridula as a psychotherapist, recently completed training, still in training. I really resonate with the grief that you expressed about how psychotherapy training excludes so much. And it kind of reduces our experience as trainee psychotherapists to something really mainstream and doesn't always encourage the kind of looking outside, really. And I guess I'm feeling the links very deeply through the last 2 days between psychotherapy and autoethnography. It's my first conference. I'm surprised, but I guess shouldn't be, that so many psychotherapists and psychotherapy students are here. I think it's amazing. And yeah, I'm trying to say, the marrying of autoethnography and the training there with the kind of more traditional psychotherapy training could be such a beautiful union, if you like, a divine union between masculine and feminine.
Yeah, sometimes I think it's not that we're too individualistic in the West. It's that we forget our innate capacities for collectivism, and then forces mitigate against the cultivation of those qualities, both in education and in the structures that we find ourselves dysfunctional in.
Thanks, Tim. Bethan, I can see your hands up. Would you like to ask your question or make your comment?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't like to ask a question. Thank you. I'm just sitting here on Anglesey with roaring wind and storm outside. I feel very dislocated from where you are. But yeah, I'm just sitting with the 4 presentations and I can't quite put coherent words together, but I feel full. I feel full of Chloe was talking about affect and what is affect. I feel full of affect. Sarah Pink's work was coming to me, sensory ethnography, Chloe, when you were talking. And I already shared with Chloe on the chat about Loic Wacont, who's a Breton man, and he went to live amongst the pugilists, the boxers in Chicago, and the grimy underworld. Don't know how to describe that, but he said it was only when he went to the same barber shop as those who were boxing and went to worship in their churches that he actually got under the skin of the people that he was looking at. So that resonated with me. And now then, I haven't got the names in front of me, but excuse me, but the lady that sang the first presentation.
Mridula.
Thank you.
Mridula.
Thank you. Yes, beautiful, beautiful voice. And that took me to a presentation I attended in Helsinki last summer at the International Conference of Music Education. And there was an amazing and poorly attended session in a side room by 4 women, all championing lesser known female voices in their individual fields. I don't have names, but it'll be in a notebook somewhere, and I'll dig them out and maybe pass them on to you, because I think your work really resonated with theirs. And then finally, I just loved the tempo, Tim. You took us into your embodied, the embodiment of your practice in the way you presented, and there were many voices that you mentioned in your philosophical thread that resonated again. So just those few thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethan.
So I think what came to me was when I was listening to Mridula's piece of how you feel like there was this erasure of ideas from the East, or you mentioned Bose, that's he's from India, I guess. How does it feel to do this doctoral piece, but here in the West, in the UK? And because you also mentioned about how the colonial past has informed cultural beliefs, identities, and so on. I think it's really brave also to have to pursue that here. And how does it feel for you? Is it easy? Yeah.
That's a constant question I keep asking myself. I know I stayed back here because of just how supportive the department is at the University of Edinburgh, and I knew I would have the space to ask these questions here, which I'm not sure how it would be like doing a PhD even back at home. The universities, even in India, are very much structured after educational models here. In fact, our education system was set up under the British, our current modern education system, that is. And so for me, I'm constantly grappling with that question. And I'm actually in conversation with my supervisors to see if I could spend a few months back at home and write from there. And what would it be like to write from India versus writing from here? What parts of myself would come out then? What hidden parts would be allowed expression? So those are questions that I am constantly thinking about. So it is a lot of back and forth, and I think it plays into the way I write as well.
Thank you. Sabina.
Hi. Yes, I've just been really deeply moved by everything this morning. I'm just delighted to be here. I've never been to an autoethnography conference before, and I spent 10 years writing an autoethnography on my own. And just being here is really filling up my heart. But I just want to say to Mridula, your work resonates very much with the work that I did and the struggle I had as a psychotherapist and now a counseling psychologist. The struggle I had with connecting with those repressed parts of myself because of patriarchy, because of colonization. And yeah, so it's really good to kind of see that kind of mirrored here in these spaces. Chloe, I'm a big nightlife person. And I'm just like utterly kind of charmed and fascinated by your topic. And in some way, like unexpectedly, because, you know, my focus has been so much on kind of therapy and all of that, but this is such a huge part of my life as well. And this is what I love about autoethnography, that it does that. And yeah, Tim, you know, I'm taking away this hanging on to a type of mindful writing that is embodied. Yeah. And the course, Fiona and Giulia, that's just sounds wonderful. I mean, I would have loved to have been on this throughout those 10 years of isolation. I would love to be on it now. And I just want to share with everyone that Fiona was my external examiner for my Viva a few months ago. And what you're talking about in this course, Fiona, I felt it. I felt that you embodied that in the way, you know, that Viva exam happened. It was like a felt sense of that kind of affective connection. And this is what I'm feeling here at this conference. This is what is so deeply meaningful about autoethnography. Yeah, that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sabina. Would any of Fiona's waving at you? Would any of the presenters like to respond to any of that? Don't feel like to. Would you like to?
Yeah, I just want to say that thank you to Sabina and give her a shout out for her. She did an amazing thesis. I don't know, I didn't think you've presented it, but you really should, because it was really fabulous. Autoethnography, labour of love for over 10 years.
Thanks, Fiona. Eve, hello.
Hi. Hi, Jonathan. I just want to say, like, this, so it's not a question, it's a comment. Just since this morning, and I think quoting back to Tim, breathing is ecological, and how all the work that every one of you are doing, actually all of us were doing from the start of this conference, is about us, others, the self and non-self, and how everything kind of connected with the practice and how we're embodied, and also how we are hoping to be understood. And I think there's really amazing hybrid voice kind of presented throughout, and in a very either from an analytical, philosophical, performance, pedagogical, you know, all of these, how these kind of connect together. And it made me feel like full. I haven't had my breakfast yet, but I feel like I'm literally feel so full. And this is something what I found quite amazing to be in this space, to see, I mean, just within this one session, I mean, for such different presentation, and it's absolutely inspiring. Like, I mean, I'm from art and design background, but just to look at these, it's just so inspiring. So I just want to say thank you. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Eve. And I'll pass.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you. It was a fantastic panel. It was really wonderful. I sort of feel I'm listening to what presenters have said here. I'm coming from Chloe's atmospheric haze. There's so many forces and energies here. There's beautiful synergy in the panel. I think your work is hugely complementary. I think the course should start with all of you as being course directors. Yeah, yeah, for sure. I come from a university that's in ruins. I've been in education for 50 years and it makes me weep. But this gives me hope to hear the kind of things you're saying. It's just very powerful. Thanks very much.
Ken. Yeah, we still have some time. Thanks.
Hi, Rabina Khatun for people online. I think there was a pause where I certainly felt it when you guys finished and we just sat down, and there was a feeling I was really left with, and it's been quite hard to think of kind of the words, but I've been just writing some stuff down now. And I just, I was really struck by how gentle, how beautiful, how playful, how thoughtful. I think, Tim, you embodied that so beautifully. And all the words that I had were really soft. I think this is what autoethnography does so well. It brings a softness. Then I was thinking about the response. So the response to autoethnography, I think, is a complete contrast. It's met with, in my experience, a complete dismantling of the person, of the researcher that presents. And I think that was really shown well this morning with Eric, who wrote the poem. I don't necessarily know how to kind of respond to that, but I think that's the kind of experience that I've got with something so beautiful being met with such criticism or critique in a way that's it's deeply personal. It's not even a critique of necessarily the research methodology. It can be such a critique of the person, because that's what we bring in ethnography. And again, I don't know where to go with it, but that's kind of what I'm left with. And I just think we need more. We need more of the softness and the beauty. What you're doing is so powerful.
Thank you. We have a few more minutes. Any of you like to respond to anything? Hello, Beth, and I'll come back to you.
To clarify the question in my mind, and it's not happening, so see how it goes. But I've been thinking a lot about how, when in dialogue, different ways of knowledge struggle to understand each other. So I really like the term that you used, epistemic distance, and also what you said, Tim, about embodied extralinguistic silences. So I've been thinking a lot about, just shortly, in these dialogue experiences that I've seen where people from different worlds come into dialogue. To me, calls a lot of attention how some, like, for instance, this indigenous person was talking sometime about how when you, and he was referring to most of the people that have more of a Western modernized worldview. So he was talking about how when you speak from the head, it's different to when, and he said how he himself, he could tell when he speaks from his head or when he speaks from his heart. And I've been thinking a lot about these differences between being in the mind and being in the heart, which I'm also at the same time, like I said, also being on the body. So because of meditation, also and it brings me to your work, Mridula, and I can guess that through your the things that you can grasp because of the musical Indian classic closeness that you have, you can reach to those things that are absolutely absent in the psychotherapy Western worldview. So yeah, I'm just want to make this comment about how, and it's very present in all of you, like the 4 presentations, even though they're in very different contexts, they all speak about this mind, this Cartesian separation that we are struggling, and we're in the borderland of questioning. So I really, if anyone has any comment about how these epistemic distances can can be brought into dialogue again out of your work. I don't know if that was messy, sorry.
Anybody like to come in? Tim, and then we'll have probably one last question. Actually, two last questions. So a quick comment, Tim, and then two further.
The phenomena of disenchantment or secularization through Weber in culture in the West prompts us to think of re-enchantment. And part of that is in reducing the distance. John Hick's term is not about epistemology necessarily, it's the distance between the human and God. And I think what we've seen here is sort of when we embody spirituality. So it's the mystical rather than the religious, that lived process. That's one response.
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. So Bethan and then Sabina, these will be the last comments or questions, and we'll need to leave it after that. Bethan, do you want to come in first?
My comment was thinking about, was it Robin who was speaking in the room? Am I right with the name? The person who made the comments about almost like dismantling the academic critique. And it's something that I've been thinking a lot about, because when we present autoethnography, it's my experience, presenting autoethnography in a non-autoethnographic community, in more of a critical academic, whatever we want to call it, I've always found after I finish presenting, there's a silence in the room. There's literally nobody says anything. And I come away thinking, oh, how did that go down? And I was discussing with a colleague, and she said, yes, but when you take somebody on a journey into their body, you leave them wordless. And there is this kind of, you take away that other layer and you make them touch with their affect. And I think the comments that were made, I think by Robin, really helped me understand. You were saying about the softness and the beauty. And I think in that there's a vulnerability and almost like a disarmingness about the audience that we speak to. It takes them to a different place where they don't even know where that place is. So the call for more, I think, is there. Thank you.
Thanks, Bethan. I think that was Rabina. Yeah, right.
The reaction. Thank you. I'm just going to continue the conversation a little bit more. I think what I was speaking to as well was this thing about, I think the reaction for me is really stark. It's so proportionate, it's disproportionate. So we're bringing something really lovely and gentle, and the reaction is actually, it's met with something so destructive. And people, I've spoken to colleagues in the conference, and we're left with a sense of shame. And I think the thing that I'm trying to say is the shame is not for us to pick up. I would say it's shame on them. You know, what we're bringing is joy. It's joyous, and it's being met with such subterfuge, or just it mirrors stuff like colonialism and all things like that we talk about so openly. And I've never been to a conference where we talk about love so openly, and I guess I don't think I ever really will either. What's happening here is really special, and I really want people to be able to keep to the heart of it, even knowing that it's going to be met with unkindness and beyond.
Thank you. Sabina, final words to you. No pressure.
I just, wanted to respond to you, Rabina, is it? It's about what you were saying about the softness and maybe that softness is a resistance. It's an epistemic refusal and disobedience that allows for kind of new or maybe very old ways of knowing to emerge. So yeah, just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabina. Thank you to all of you who've been online with us and for all your contributions and your presence. And to Chloe for presenting, thank you. And thank you to all the presenters here in the room. And thank you to all of you for being part of this as witnesses and participants. It's been lovely. Thank you.